Hi, happy Easter everybody, and welcome to day 5. I'm a little late on this one. I did actually start it yesterday, but I've only just finished it off this morning, so you'll probably get 2 today just so I can catch up a bit. I don't want to get behind Rachel. So today's inspiration was inspired by Lulu. So what I've done is I've decided to make some clips inspired by Lulu's clips that she made. You might have seen that video on Rachel's YouTube. But I've done something slightly different. So I've gone for a butterfly theme because I know that Lulu loves butterflies and also very girly colours. So the first thing I did is I found a image of a butterfly, just a shape, which I traced onto some quilters plastic template material, and then I traced it onto some brown. It's kind of thick paper, thin cardstock kind of material, just cheap crafty stuff. So I'm cutting out my templates. I cut out one for each butterfly in the brown cardboard. And then what I also did is I traced it onto cheap acrylic felt, and I've also cut out the felt shapes using the same template. Then what I've done is I've picked some material and I've just used a little bit of PVA, a few dots to hold the material in place. And then I cut the material down into the butterfly shape as well. So hopefully you can see from my angle under my sewing machine, what I do is I now just randomly stitch the fabric down onto the felt, and it's kind of like almost like the veins of the butterfly. I sort of angle them all over the place. I'll show you a bit closer once I'm done. And what it does is it secures the fabric down really nicely. So here's the stitching. You can see it a bit closer. Sorry, the camera's a bit wobbly. Just cutting off the excess threads from the end because I don't stop each time. I just turn it around and keep sewing. So just going to get rid of them. So now you can see kind of the veins I've done on the butterfly. And just to show you up close, the next step I do is I got little pieces of lace and little crochet trims to just add a little bit of an interesting element onto your butterfly. So I've got one on each side and they just line up randomly in the middle. You'll actually cover the middle with the body of the butterfly, so it doesn't matter that it's not perfect. So to secure these, I literally just sew them straight down onto the material. I don't go perfectly around the edges. Just through the center down each side, kind of like in a rectangle, just to hold it in place. Okay, so all done. Hopefully you can just see I've just sewn randomly around the edges. I'm showing you with my finger, and then again just cutting off any excess threads. This is a pretty rustic project. You will have bits and pieces of threads everywhere. I just trim them along as I go, get them out of the way. The back will end up being covered by the cardboard, so it doesn't matter how bad it looks on the back. Now what I'm doing is I'm just sewing all the way around the outside of the butterfly just to make sure the fabric's held down. With my other ones, I actually did that in a different order. I sewed all the way around the outside, and then the last thing I added was the lace. But with this one, I did the lace first, just because I forgot to sew around it, but I've gone back and I've done that now. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So if you can just see my stitching, I'm just showing you how I've gone all the way around the edge, and again just cutting off those loose threads to neaten it up. Now it's time to add the little body of the butterfly. I cut this little green piece out of some felted wool. You could also use felt if you wanted to. I just like the fact that it's a bit more textural, it's raised. You could embroider it if you want to, but that would take a bit of effort. You could also use fabric, although I think just plain fabric would sit a little flat. Something with a bit of texture in is going to give it a bit more of an interesting look. So I'm just using 2 strands of stranded DCM thread in a kind of a dark purpley burgundy kind of colour. And it's just a simple straight stitch, and I'll show you what that looks like once I'm done. I just finish it up on the back by running my needle under some of my stitches, and if you can see, really tiny little stitches there, just straight stitches to hold down that body. Now what I need to do is I'm just going to firstly trim off the edges, because sometimes once you've stitched it you don't always line it up perfectly, and a bit of the felt was showing through there. So I'm using the exact same butterfly template which I cut out of the cardboard, and I'm using PVA glue just because I want it to hold really securely, and it also, because my cardboard is a little thin, I probably should have used something slightly thicker. It actually strengthens up the hold onto the fabric, which is good. So I'm just getting my little paper clip, sliding it on. There's already glue there, and then I put a little bit more on just to make sure it's secure, and then I line my butterfly up and I press it down. Okay, so then I flip it over just to see if it's all lined up and it's secured well. I find that I usually have to add a little bit more PVA around the edges just to make sure it's a really good fix. Sometimes I'm going to actually trim off a bit of the cardboard because it sticks out a little bit as well, which you'll see me do. Okay, I left the first ones that I made yesterday, I left them to dry overnight. That's why I didn't want to put the video up until today, because I just wanted to see if it worked out. So I had a bit of a practice yesterday, and the ones that I made last night are nice and secure. So just trimming off a bit of that cardboard now. Just being careful not to trim too much fabric at the front. Alright, so now you just leave that to dry. So here are a few of the other butterflies that I made. 2 of them aren't quite finished yet, so I'm going to go ahead and finish them off and show you what I'm doing. So with this one here, I've again using 2 strands of a stranded cotton in a bright green, and I'm actually this time I'm stitching right over the top of that body, just to sort of give it like veins or ribs across the body of the butterfly. I'll show you that close up in a minute. So they're really randomly spaced, and I even go back and fill in a few gaps. There's nothing even about it. I don't want it to be even. I want it to be a bit all over the shop. And then I'm also going to add a few French knots as well, which I'll show you soon. So a simple explanation of how to do a French knot. You come up through the fabric, wrap your thread around your needle as many times as you want. I've gone for 4, and then you go back down through the fabric, not into the exact same hole, but just next to it, and just hold the end of that thread sort of in place so you don't get tangles. So I do 3 French knots on the base of the bottom wing on each side. Just finishing that up on the back, doing a bit of a knot so it's nice and secure. So here's my finished butterfly with the stitching randomly across the body and 3 French knots on either side. Now I'm going to do the same process as before and glue the cardboard down onto the butterfly, securing the paper clip in the middle. So that's all stuck down. I'm just finishing up some final trims around the edge, and now I'll get onto my last butterfly. So with this one I use different fabrics on the top and on the bottom with a bit of lace in the middle. So this time I'm going to use a blue thread, 2 strands again, and I'm going to stitch over the top of it just like I did with the last one, with the green one, with some veins. And here you can see the veins going over the top. So you could actually do a bit of embroidery on these, a bit more than what I've done. I might experiment and do a bit more on some of them. The ones I did yesterday, you can see I stitch a few random bits of, it was kind of like a brown thread, that one, on a couple of the butterflies, the one with the Liberty and the other one that looks a bit like Liberty as well. But with these ones, I just kept them simple. They're pretty boring without the lace, except for the one that's got embroidery. I didn't add any lace because that's already really interesting with all that embroidery. So I was thinking some people might not want to sew, or might not be very good at sewing, or may not have a machine. So I thought another easy way to do these butterfly clips would be to do them in paper. So I've got some of that Tim Holtz, it's kind of like that decorating paper. It's kind of like the one that you can see through, like a tissue paper. So I decided that I'm just going to stick that straight down onto the butterfly and cut it out, and then I'm going to add a body as well, which I've cut out of a book page that I dyed, and I actually just painted some ribs across it, which you'll see in a minute. And this is a perfectly good way to make a paper one as well. You could also decorate it with different papers, whatever you want. I think there's a lot of different possibilities. And then using the exact same process to stick the back on, I'm going to use PVA. This one lines up well because I actually cut that template out at the beginning, as you saw. The PVA just strengthens up that paper because it is probably a little too thin. I should have used a thicker one. So now I'm just going to show you, I've got this beautiful journal from Moonside Parlour, and so I'm just going to show you some of the different ways that you can stick your butterflies into a journal. So you could add them to the side of a page, and you might even stick like a tag or a postcard under that clip. And then I'm just trying to find another space where I could put one. I haven't used this journal yet, so I don't want to wreck it. And here's a little pocket where I can just slip a butterfly onto the top there. Okay, I've just bended the paper up, just fix that, make it lie flat. And the butterfly wings will actually stick out, which I think is pretty cool. It looks nice with them sticking out the side. And then the other thing I thought you could do, so this journal was tied up with a string. I thought you could stick it on the top of the front of a journal, just as an interesting element. Or you could stick it over the top of the strings to add a bit more interest as well on the front, which I like. So here are my butterflies that I've worked on finished. I hope that you like them. It's a pretty simple project, easy to do, especially if you've got a sewing machine, but you could also do a paper version. So here are just a few photos of how I'd like to use my Lulu inspired butterflies. I hope you like what I did, Lulu, and that they are your style. See you later.